Just one more hour until reinforcements, aka me, arrive to save the day. But until then, keep your eyes on the highway and keep on trucking with Jimmy Mack on Road Gang Radio, y'all.
Hey guys, I don't know if you know this. After making, this is kind of cool. It is National Seatbelt Day, National Safety Belt Day. After making the 3-point seatbelt standard in Sweden, Volvo opened up the patent so other car manufacturers could adopt this essential safety feature in their models. Think about that, by the way. This is in the 60s. So what Volvo did in the 60s was it actually gave away proprietary technology to ensure the safety of everybody out there on the road. By 1968, seatbelts were a standard requirement in all U.S. manufactured vehicles. Today, seatbelts are a valued mechanism in cars. They save thousands of lives and several $100 million in medical costs. You guys know this because you do it for a living. You understand this. What a lot of commuters and a lot of motorists don't understand is it not only prevents you from getting hurt worse, it allows you, in many occasions, to maintain control of the vehicle. You don't get thrown from the wheel. And I swear to God, Dre, full-grown men, full-grown women, you tell them that, they intuitively, once you tell them, they go, oh, that makes perfect sense. It's like, dude, who raised you? I'm telling you, under 50 and you don't know that kind of stuff, raised wrong. Straight up raised wrong. I got to talk to your mom, got to talk to your dad. We've also got to do a Fastport Friday Focus. So what do you say we turn to that now? By the way, love this deal. Michael DreamChaser Smith is joining us this morning. The story itself is Michael. Michael is the story. There's so much to unpack here, by the way. We're thrilled to have him here this morning. It doesn't begin with an injury, but the center of the story, the great pivot point, the twist in the plot is got a double twist in the plot. There's an injury, the aftermath, and then there's a return to glory. And Michael joins us this morning, Michael DreamChaser Smith. Michael, like I said, normally I kind of unpack people's bios and give them a little bit of a shout out. I think this story is so remarkable that it bears kind of you telling about it. The only thing I will put at the top of this is that you served 24 years in the U.S. Army. You retired as a sergeant first class after 4 tours abroad, and you had been on active duty since 1998. That is all I will say, because there is so much to kind of unpack here. Good morning. Welcome to Road Gang Radio, my friend.
Good morning. Good morning. Thank you for having me. I really appreciate it.
All right. So I want to talk a little bit about your commitment to your country, your service, and then we're going to get to plot twist number 1. So tell us about yourself and how it is you gravitated into the U.S. Army. By the way, my dad is a former captain, so I have a deep, and I've covered you guys from a journalist point of view, have a deep affection for you fellas. So thank you for your service, but tell us why it is you chose to serve.
Right. Like I said, thank you for having me, and appreciate your dad's service as a captain. Obviously, he paves the way for a lot of us. So, yeah, definitely appreciate that. I don't even know where to begin. I mean, like you said, I joined the Army in 1998. I'm from Dallas, Texas. Originally I joined just to see my way out. You know what I mean? And, I'll be the first to admit I didn't join for patriotic reasons. I feel like a lot of us, don't, but then later on became super patriotic and proud of the country that I was born in and I currently live in. I joined, essentially just to be a better version of myself, and just to go to college and do all the things, and it wasn't until, I started maturing as a young man that I saw like what the real reason was. And I saw, me serving my country was just a huge calling that a lot of people don't get the opportunity to do. So, I really started taking advantage of that and started doing all the things, going to different schools and different duty stations and deployments, and really just started getting really involved in being a leader and what that means and what that entails, and leading troops to combat and serving my country. Despite all the things that we go through in this country, we still live in the greatest country in the world. You know what I mean? And so I'm proud of that fact, and I'm proud to be a soldier.
Okay, so this is really interesting. You did 4 tours abroad, but
Yes, sir.
it's while you were station commander in Nashville, Tennessee, that plot twist number 1 comes up.
Hmm.
And by the way, today is National Seatbelt Day. I don't know if you know that. In regards to people kind of taking care of themselves out there on the road. Most of the people listening know to do that. And this doesn't connect directly. I just think it's important to remember road safety at this time. But tell us what happened. Over as a station commander in Nashville, Tennessee, that changes your life, and then we'll get to how you change a lot of other people's lives.
Right. So, so didn't grow up riding motorcycles, but over the course of my military career, I became a motorcycle enthusiast, especially when I was stationed in California. Ended up moving to Nashville, Tennessee, where I became a station commander for recruiting operations. One night, I believe it was Friday or Saturday night, I was on my motorcycle with a few other friends. Wasn't doing anything crazy, wasn't being reckless, and a lady was texting and driving. And, the funny thing about all of that is I saw her texting and driving. I saw her enter the on-ramp of the highway that I was on. It just so happened it was in front of the Titan Stadium. I saw her texting and driving, and I saw her veering over to my lane, and, one thing led to another. She hit me from the side so hard that it threw me over the guardrail into oncoming traffic. And, one of the things I remember was while I was flailing upside down, it was one of the quickest slow motion events of my entire life.
Oh my God. Having been through something myself, you are so right, where it seems like they go by in the blink of an eye and then in bullet time at the same time, where you're just like...
Right. It's crazy. Yeah, you're right. It's crazy because it was an instant, but then within that moment, it was like everything slowed down to where I knew what was happening. I can't explain it. Like you said, I just can't explain it, but it happened in the blink of an eye. But within that moment, everything slowed down, and I could see clearly a white F-150 and its headlights coming towards me. And I just remember being hit and hitting the ground. And I believe it, it may have knocked me out for a couple of seconds, but then I remember a bunch of lights, a bunch of car horns waking me up, and it startled me. But then, just after all that military training that I've had, the several combat tours, you instantly go into that flight or fight moment. And I just remember telling myself I needed to get out the road because I noticed I was still on the highway. So I remember trying to scoot myself back to the guardrail so I could get up. And I just remember trying to get up, and I tried to brace my hand on the ground. I ended up placing it in my other hand, and I tried to stand up, and I legit pulled my arm outside of my motorcycle jacket. And it was severed. It was severed on the spot. And I just remember I was being in trouble then. I know I think I passed out, and when I came back to, my head was laying in this lady's lap. To this day, I think she was an angel because nobody knows who she was. We can't get a hold of the lady. But turns out my head was laying in her lap. My helmet was off. My boots came off. And I remember her telling me distinctly, hey, I'm going to have to stop the bleeding or else you're going to bleed to death on this highway and you're not going to make it. So I told her, I was like, hey, I have a tourniquet inside of my jacket. And she kind of I never saw her face, but I could hear the pause. And so she reached in my jacket, and I told her, I was like, I'm going to tell you how to apply it so that she could save my life. And the moment she told me she was a Navy corpsman, I think that was maybe God's way of telling me you're going to be okay. The moment she told me she was a Navy corpsman, I immediately let go. I knew I was going to be safe. And so anybody will tell you about me today, till this day, I would never, ever make fun of the Navy. I never made fun of the Navy. This lady came out of nowhere and saved my life. And, the crazy thing is there's not a Navy base in Kentucky. So where she came from, I don't know. I don't know if she was on leave. I don't know if she was on special assignment. Who knows? But this lady came out of nowhere and saved my life. And and got me ready or got me stable until the paramedics could show up. So yeah.
Okay, at this point, I want to kind of, Michael is joining us this morning, and we are so thrilled to have him. And I mean that from both directions, not just thrilled to have you here on this particular morning, but thrilled to have you, period. Michael DreamChaser Smith is joining us this morning. He got a long time in the military service. He retired. And by the way, notice I used the word retire because we're going to get to that in a second, too. Plot twist number 2 from the U.S. Army. But, okay, so you've lost your arm. A naval corpsman seems to appear out of nowhere to be able to apply the tourniquet. Probably saves your life. You would have bled out. You probably would have gone into shock. People forget that stemming bleeding out prevents you from going into shock. Shock is the first step towards death. She got you through it. You got yourself through it. So you come to in the hospital. They're putting you together, and then you learn you're not going to get that arm back. That's the ball game, correct?
Right. Yep.
So normally people at this point are kind of, asked to maybe think about what they're going to do with the rest of their lives outside of the military. I want you to tell folks what happens next.
Yeah. So, it's, I have a phenomenal family support with my mom and my sister and my grandparents, who are no longer with us. But one of the things that my mom told me, when I first came to, because when I came to, it was my mom, my grandmother, and my uncle. And then one of the first things that my mom said to me, which, I didn't understand at the moment, was, was that, God has a plan for you. I didn't know what that meant. All I know is in my head, I'm thinking like, lady, I just lost my entire right arm. Like, what are you talking about right now? That's all I could think about. But, she told me that, he has a plan for you. And one of the other things that she told me was, God never puts anything on you that you can't handle. So not really understanding what that meant, as I'm going through the process, as I'm going through multiple surgeries, and going through all the things, I've always been that type of person that whatever I start, I don't want to quit until it's all done. And transferring from a hospital to a WTU or to a warrior transition unit is what they used to be called. But so I can do all of my healing, I began to notice like there were other young men and women that were hurt, coming back from combat or, from different situations. But just my attitude and my demeanor, I saw that people were gravitating towards me. And I began to realize like my mom was right. I do have a bigger purpose. And my purpose became that, to lead, inspire, and motivate, encourage. And that became my passion. That became my drive. That became my purpose. That became my why. And, I realized, what my mom was talking about. And so, just going throughout that course, I also realized that a lot of people go through life not knowing what their why is, not knowing what their purpose was. And I knew what mine was, and I knew what I needed to do. And so I began to fight like hell to stay in the military, man. Like it meant everything in the world to me to stay in the military because I wanted to show people that you could be knocked down, but not be knocked out. You know what I mean? And I found the true meaning of what resiliency meant, and I just wanted to stay in. And trust me, like when I tell you, the Army made it very, very hard for me to stay in. I was coming up on, my medical retirement, and I was just fighting. I was just fighting like hell. Like I said, I did all the protocols I was supposed to. I requalified with my weapon. I did all of my MOS recertifications, both artillery and infantry. I did my physical fitness test. I did everything that I was supposed to do as an able-bodied person to stay in the military. And, with God's grace and me meeting at the time President Obama, with his assistance, like I was able to stay in the military. And I was charged with the duties of, I was going to be the first above elbow amputee in the history of the military to stay in. And so I had a responsibility, and that responsibility was to lead. And, that's what I did and continue to do.
I want people to realize this. This is a medical retirement, straight up. This is one of those things where the question isn't a matter of you need to think about retirement. This is when they come to you and they say, "This is the ball game. We love you and we're so proud of you, but there's nothing much we can do here. We're sorry, but that's it." You resist that. You hold on tight with your one existing arm. You hold on tight.
Right.
And by the way, you're suddenly left-handed now too. I want to point this out to people that you originally were, when God brings you into the world, when your mom brings you into the world, you are a right-handed human being, correct?
Right. Yes, sir.
By the way, I'm left-handed by birth. It's a pain in the ass. I can't even imagine what it would be like to have to shift over. See, I can do stuff with my right because the world is designed for people who operate that way. But to shift over from right to left and not have a choice about it is remarkable. You fight the military retirement. You have to adjust to a world where your dominant hand is no longer there for you, and somehow you manage to claw your way back with your one good hand, the one existing hand, and you become an unprecedented reinstatement, active duty. You are the first above elbow amputee, active duty, return to active duty soldier in history of the military. Correct?
Yes, sir. Yes, sir.
Unbelievable. That's in 2015 that happens. Okay, that in and of itself would be enough. That would be bravo, well done. But when you're a dream chaser, and by the way, this is a thing for me on a personal level, and you'll get this too. My wife and I love riding mountain bikes, so you'll know exactly where we're going here. Michael, by the way, is a Paralympic triathlete and cyclist. So I want you to kind of unpack how you get into cycling, because you were a motorbike guy. Were you always a bicycle guy, or did you make that transition once you had actually began your new life?
Yeah, no, it's funny because when you're kids, that's what you do. Well, I'm 45, so when I was growing up, there was no stay in the house and watch video games all day. It was, hey, go outside. And
until the sun goes down, until the street lights come on. I know what you're talking about.
Exactly. So me, my sister, my cousins, we would get on our bikes and we would take off and be gone. We would literally ride our bikes across the city, and be gone all day and, be on bikes. And, the funny thing is there was one particular moment where I was a young guy. I was a young man. Well, yeah, I was a young man, and my grandfather wanted to ride bikes from Arlington, Texas to Dallas, Texas to my aunt's house. And at the time, I mean, right now it sounds crazy, but at the time, it was just so exciting to be with my grandfather to do this thing. And I was like, yeah, we could do that. Absolutely. So we did it, not knowing that was going to be my intro into my recovery later on in life, well after he's gone. But that was how I recovered. That was one of the first things I started doing when a part of my recovery was riding a bike. And a young lady by the name of Heather, who works at BAMSI in San Antonio, she became just another woman that I met that became one of my saving grace. She's a adaptive sports person out there, and she introduced me to cycling, and it was like the rest was history. I started cycling. I started doing triathlons, and I ran a couple of marathons, and started doing obstacle course races and riding horses, and I was just doing everything that I could, to be healthy and to get back on track and to make sure I was relevant in the Army. And it was her that challenged me to a triathlon, and I was like, yeah, why not? I'll do it. And it was her that, she's one of the reasons why I ended up being on the national team for a skeleton bobsled. So I did that for a long time. And then she linked me up with a team, and we started riding our bikes, like literally from state to state. Was doing all these things, not knowing that I had an opportunity at, the Paralympic scene. And I was training for skeleton bobsled for an international race. A friend of mine asked me to do a triathlon. Ended up being Ironman 70.3, which was my very first race. And I fell in love with it. And I fell in love with it because it was extremely hard. And one of the memorable things that I remember was I was out of it and I could barely get through it. And I just remember hitting that red carpet them announcing my name, telling me I was an Ironman. And from that moment forward, I fell in love with being a triathlete and became an elite pro triathlete for, on the Paralympic scene. And, started coaching it. So now I coach a youth team out of Dallas, Texas for Play Try. And then, about a year ago, I decided I was going to give cycling a shot and transfer my license over to be a Paralympic pro cyclist. And here I am. My first year, I won 3 national championship jerseys, which, is a pretty huge feat. And that was only my first year. So now we're gunning for LA, and we're going to see how that goes.
I have to tell you, by the way, once again, Michael has also left out the fact that he's the 2025 U.S. Cycling C5 Para National Champion. By the way, you've actually been in the field and won a couple of competitions. I did want to ask you about the triathlete stuff here real quickly, because it seems to me that the biggest challenge for everybody who's in that competition in regards to triathletics is the water. Is the water aspect, right? I mean, swimming is a component of what we're talking about here, and that's it's a difficult adjust. Look. Jim Abbott was born without one of his hands. He also was born with a major league arm. There's no adjustment for Jim. Jim never knew a world where he actually had an operating hand. So all he knew was that he had a major league arm. So when the Cubans tried to bunt on him, he'd been doing it his whole life, threw out 3 of them at the top of the Olympic Games. The Cubans came to the top of the dugout, applauded him, and on the game went. You're having to relearn the world. How do you go about relearning swimming? I mean, how do you do that so that you can swim competitively? I mean, of course you can float. You've got great core strength. You can do that in the water. But how do you competitively swim when you've lost an arm? How do you learn to do that?
Yeah, the crazy thing is I didn't even know. I knew how to swim, but I didn't know how to swim before I lost my arm. And like I said, that was just one of the things that was introduced to me as a part of my rehab. And I've always been that person. If you put before me a challenge, I want to not only do I want to do it, but I want to conquer it. I want to master it. I want to become great at it. So, it was. Trust me, even to this day, I'm always learning. But essentially, I swim like everybody else, freestyle. I just do it with one arm, and I have to be very efficient with my technique. But I just do it, man. I don't even know sometimes, like when I'm swimming and me and a friend or Dan, if we're swimming in the pool for like an hour or so, like when I get done, I have to sit at the edge of the pool and just be like, I have no idea how I just did that, because it's tiring because you're doing everything with one hand, so it's twice the amount of effort.
I'm gonna make you laugh here. I think you're doing it in honor of. I think you got so good at swimming in honor of the naval corpsmen. I think you said, I'm going to honor these Navy guys who actually stepped in on the road and actually really master this down. Speaking of Navy people in the chat, our good friend Trucker Bosun, who is a naval veteran, says, you have an inspirational story, brother. Thank you for your service. If you guys want to ask Michael questions, don't hesitate to drop in on the chat and just fire one away. We'd love to hear from you. Okay. So can you talk a little bit, we'll go back to your military service here. So once you go back to active duty, can you kind of talk about what your assignment was, how they managed to maintain the active duty? Because, like I said, I can imagine there's a number of places, and given a bright man you are, there's a number of places where you could thrive as both a recruiter. There are a number of desk jobs you could have, but here you are not behind a desk. I mean, living your best life. So how did you kind of do your military career in the aftermath?
Yeah, so it's really, man, every time I talk about it, and you're asking some of the questions that I've been asked, but you just ask them in a different way, and so you just made me kind of go back down memory lane. I think when they granted me the opportunity to stay active duty, nobody knew what that was going to look like. I didn't know what they was going to look like. At the time, Command Sergeant Major Tabitha Gavia was one of my saving graces. She's the one that allowed me to stay on, but I don't think anybody knew what that was going to look like. All I knew was my mission wasn't over, and I needed to make an impact on not only on my family, my friends, but the people around me, and also the Army. And so one of the first things I wanted to do is I wanted to go back to recruiting, because I had a message, and recruiting into the United States military in itself is already hard, right? With the people that's not qualified, and also like sometimes trying to sell the military to young men and women these days is like trying to sell a Dodge Neon to a rich person. It just doesn't happen. So, but I had a story. I had a story, and I wanted to share that, and I wanted to be as impactful as I could. So I chose to go back to recruiting. I chose to use my story to impact the men and women that I was leading, and I also used that stage to go to different schools and different events to tell my story. And it was like, hey, look, the Army saved my life in so many ways that you can't even imagine. And that's kind of when I use like the whole intangibles and just, I just tried to use that initially as my platform to start inspiring. And then, I was still participating in the Invictus Games that Prince Harry, put on, and I was still doing the Warrior Games. And, I had a really good friend of mine that, was like, hey, there's this thing called the Paralympics. You should really try it. And, so I did. And, like I said before, like that's when I was introduced to skeleton bobsledding. I just so happened got really good at that, made the national team, was ranked number 3 in the world. And then, was still doing triathlons. I won a national championship. And then that's when I was introduced to, there's a program in the military called the Army World Class Athlete Program. And it's essentially is you become a pro athlete for the military. And each branch has their own version of it. Just the Army happens to have, I would say, not trying to differentiate between the branches, but the Army happens to have the best one because it's the biggest branch. And so we have more athletes and we send more people to the Olympics. But my job for the military, for the Army, was to represent the Army not only as a soldier, but as a Team USA competitor, which in my head, like when I first lost my arm, I never thought that would be something I'd be able to do. And there's not many people in this world that could say, hey, I represent my country as a soldier and as an athlete, So I had the U.S. Army on my chest and I had Team USA on my back. And I would say year to date, that's probably that's top 5 of one of the, biggest accomplishments I've ever done in my entire life, man. And, once again, that's just one of the things that the Army provided for me. And that was a part of my career, so for, 6 years, 7 years, that's what I did, was compete and travel the world on behalf of the United States Army.
We got to wrap it up here. I just want to tell you, by the way, the Army is his shield, and the USA has got his back. Michael DreamChaser is with us, Michael DreamChaser Smith. I just want to say thank you. Is there any place where you want to direct people to socials or anybody you want to tell hello to? You got about 20 seconds left here, my friend. Really appreciate it.
Yeah, so absolutely. My Instagram is, where people can find me. If you look up Michael DreamChaser Smith, that's my Instagram. And once again, I appreciate you having me on here. It's an honor, and I just appreciate my family and friends for all their support. And, none of this is possible without them.
By the way,